Hello again, gamers. Welcome back for another episode of Grokking Battletech. I'm the board game captain, and today I'm going to be telling you how to grok the Enforcer. So before we get started, I do want to give a big thank you to one of my regular viewers, Heinrich Muller, who requested that I cover the Enforcer in an episode of Grokking Battletech. So Heinrich, this episode is for you. Now, also, before I get too started, I want to say I've got a ton of links in the description down below that you can check out at your leisure. There's a link to BoardGameCaptain.com, which is a great hub for all things Board Game Captain. There's also a link to my Teespring store. You can get yourself lots of cool Board Game Captain merch, t-shirts, mugs, etc. Like the t-shirt I'm wearing right now, which says, buy me board games and tell me I'm pretty. There's also plenty of other shirts and mugs there with all sorts of funny sayings on them. In addition, if you are in a position to and would like to support the channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description down below. All right, so the Enforcer. The Enforcer is a 50-ton medium mech that is meant to be fairly decent speed for a medium mech with fairly decent ranged firepower. The basic version of the Enforcer can jump, it can move, it can fire, and it can do it all pretty well during the Succession War time period. And then there are a handful of other versions as you go forward. Now we're going to go over all of the versions, or just about all of the versions of the Enforcer, because it's not actually that hard. We're going to do a couple of custom versions for this mech, because there aren't that many versions of the Enforcer. We're going to make a lance with it, and I'm going to give you a recommended mech warrior to use with my favorite cannon version of the Enforcer. So the first version of the Enforcer, what people generally consider to be the basic version of the Enforcer, is the ENF4R. Now, it's got a 4-6-4 movement, so you got 4 jumping and 6 running for the Succession Wars and a medium mech. That's not bad. It also has a decent amount of armor. We've got 23 armor on the center torso. We have 17 on the side torsos, 14 on the arms, 20 on the legs, full 9 on the head. The rear is much less, with only 4 and 3 in the rear torso sections, respectively. But its firepower and its heat sinks are actually really respectable for a Succession War era medium mech. You've got an autocannon 10, a large laser, and a small laser. Now, the small laser is a throwaway backup weapon for stuff gets really close, but that autocannon 10 being up to 15 hexes away, and the large laser the same, being up to 15 hexes away, and being able to do 10 and 8 damage respectively at a fairly decent range in the Succession Wars is nothing to sneeze at, especially when this mech has 12 single heat sinks. Now, the 12 single heat sinks is actually enough to walk and fire the autocannon 10 and the large laser without overheating, which is amazing for a lot of mechs during the Succession Wars, because quite a few of them have heat problems. Now, granted, if you jump that 4 hexes, you're going to overheat by 3 heat, but that's not a lot. You could then jump and not fire the large laser, just fire the autocannon 10 to cool right back down if you wanted to. Or really, you could do it a couple times before doing that in reality, because the amount you overheat is really not that much. It's 3 heat is not bad. This is for the Succession War time period actually a very good medium mech, when generally speaking the Succession War time period does not have a lot of great medium mechs. It's not my favorite, but it is a quite capable mech to jump around and stay at medium range and harass enemies and give fire support for this time period. Now, the next version of the Enforcer I want to talk about is the ENF5D. This is the clan invasion upgrade of the Enforcer. Now, there's some really good things about this, and there are some really lousy things about this. So let's go over it. So first off, the first really good thing is that the mech does become a bit more vulnerable, so that kind of is a bad thing, because you had to add in the extra light fusion engine to add a lot more stuff onto it. But the really good thing is we up the movement to 585. Now, 585 movement is really good, and really good for a medium mech in the clan invasion time period. 5 jumping is definitely nothing to sneeze at. You get those target modifiers up higher. You also are just far more maneuverable for moving in to hit your enemy. Also, though, you have the same basic armor of the previous versions. So you maintain that fairly decent armor. You've got the 23 on the center torso, 19 on the sides, 9 on the head, 16 on the arms, 21 on the legs, actually a little bit improved there, and improved on the rear too, with 7 and 5 on the rear torso sections respectively. Very similar to the armor, a little bit better. The weapons loadout is better. We upgrade the autocannon 10 to an LB-10X autocannon, and we upgrade the large laser to an ER large laser. We keep that small laser for backup, but the biggest problem with this mech is that it still only has single heat sinks. This weapon loadout is a lot more heat intensive than the previous one, and with 12 single heat sinks, literally all you have to do is fire the ER large laser and walk, and you're overheating by 1. So now you're firing the autocannon and you're now overheating by 3. And if you jumped 5 instead of walked, because it's quite possible you have a mech that can jump 5, you're going to want to do that, you're now overheating by 7. So yeah, there are some issues with this. I think the issues definitely just could have been solved by doing some double heat sinks, really. If you had switched to double heat sinks, I think it would have basically solved all the problems with this mech. I don't know why they didn't do that. Now I'd like to talk about a couple of custom versions that were done of the 4R and the 5D that we just talked about. These are custom versions, the 4R Daniel and the 5D Daniel. Now the 4R was a experimental version using a lot of the new tech that was rediscovered from the Helm Memory course. You had an experimental version of the Gauss rifle and also double heat sinks. So this, I'm going to just briefly touch on this. Basically, it was a Gauss rifle and 2 medium lasers armed version of the 4R with some, experimental tech. But the 5D is the one I want to go into more detail, because the 5D Daniel is a upgraded version of Daniel's Enforcer, where he upgraded it with production models of double heat sinks and Gauss rifle, so that they're no longer experimental versions. And this version should have become a production model somewhere. It is my favorite cannon version of the Enforcer. It is absolutely amazing. So the 5D Daniel, we've got 585 movement that the 5D is known for. We have 23 armor on the center torso, 19 on the sides, 16 on the arms, 21 on the legs, the 7 and the 5 on the rear torso section respectively, and the 9 on the head, which means it's exactly the same as the 5D, which is really good. That was obviously an improvement. We upgrade the heat sinks to 10 double heat sinks, and we swap out the weapon loadout for an ER small laser, a Gauss rifle, and 2 ER medium lasers. So you have the big gun, the Gauss rifle, to now punch holes with enemies at range, and then if you get a little bit closer, you can use the ER medium lasers, and if you get really close, even the ER small laser, to try to find the hole made by the Gauss rifle. This definitely should have been a production model of the Enforcer. It is the best cannon Enforcer in my opinion. It is so good. Yeah, I love this version. So there's not much more to say about it other than the fact that it's awesome. We have one more cannon version to go into. This is a Dark Age version of the Enforcer. It is the ENF5R. Now this has a 464 movement, so it is slowed down back to the movement of the Succession War versions of the Enforcer. I am not a huge fan of that. We do maintain the same armor exactly as the other 5 variants that we've been discussing. It has a LB-10X autocannon like the normal 5D, and it swaps out the ER large laser for a large re-engineered laser, and then it swaps out the small laser for an ER small laser. So the large re-engineered laser is the thing that makes this this mech a little different. Re-engineered large laser has 9 damage rather than the 8 of the normal large laser, and it also ignores a lot of the issues with reflective armor and other types of armor that reduce damage from laser weapons. But really the place where this mech shines the most is in its heat sinks, because it is the first production model cannon version of the Enforcer with double heat sinks. It's got 10 double heat sinks, which means it runs quite cool, even with all of those armaments firing all the time. So yeah, I'm a fan of this version. I'm just not a fan of reducing the mobility on it, but increasing the amount of heat absorption is great. And also another thing is we also reduce that extra light engine down to a regular light fusion engine. So if you lose a side torso, this mech is not dead. So that is also another big plus in my book. Now I don't generally play Dark Age, but if I did, I would use this mech. So now I decided I wanted to make 2 custom versions. And the reason I wanted to make 2 custom versions is, like I said before, there aren't a lot of canon variants of the Enforcer. So I really felt like there should be some more. There should be some more that played around with some other weapon systems. So I decided to make 2 that I would have made as canon versions if it was up to me. So these are mechs that were designed by my own personal mech design firm, KIWF, named for the last initial of its 4 founding members, but affectionately nicknamed Kill It With Fire by its fans. So the first one is the Enforcer ENF 5D KIWF. So this is a version of the Enforcer where we're using it as a platform for trying out some captured clan tech weapons and putting them on an inner sphere chassis. So this is a mixed tech mech. Now I did upgrade it to double heat sinks, but I used inner sphere double heat sinks. The only clan tech I use are the weapons. And for weapons, we have 2 large pulse lasers, 1 in each arm, the clan versions, and 2 medium clan pulse lasers, 1 in each side torso, which means that I really needed to upgrade the heat sinking capacity also, so it has 15 inner sphere double heat sinks for a total of 30 heat sinking capacity, because this thing can heat up really, really quickly. But I think this is actually a fantastic platform with its 585 movement and decent amount of armor, a fantastic platform to try out clan pulse technology and use their own weapons against them. I actually really like this version and would really like to try it out in a game. Now, the next version I made is to try out the a little bit later time period, the Jihad era time period plasma rifle tech. So I decided to make a mech that was all based around making heat spikes on enemies. So what I did was I again took the 5D and I made the ENF 5D KIWF 2, and this one has 2 plasma rifles, 1 on each arm, and an SRM-6 on the right torso with a single ton of Inferno rounds, specifically Inferno rounds, loaded into it. So what you're doing is you're jumping around and getting in a bit closer with that 585 movement. You can do that. You want to get about 10 hexes from your enemy. So you can hit them with the 2 plasma rifles, doing 10 damage each, causing a D6 heat spike from each hit, and then also hitting them when you get even closer with the SRM-6s and causing more heat spikes. You can even possibly, with the 2 plasma rifles and the SRM-6s, if you get into point blank range, especially if you're on the side or rear of an enemy where you're not as vulnerable yourself, you can even cause as much as a maximum heat spike, possible 15 points of heat to your enemy, which even in the Jihad era, there are plenty of mechs that have heat issues. That 15 extra heat would be something that would be difficult for them to deal with. So those are my 2 custom versions of the Enforcer. Okay, so my favorite version of the Enforcer, of course, is the 5D Daniel with its Gauss rifle. So I decided I was going to pick a mech warrior to put in that version of the Enforcer. So I chose Wasim Nafeh, who is a 4-cost mech warrior. Now you will use Nasim if agreeing to play with 4-cost mech warriors with your opponent. He has a gunnery skill of 3 and a piloting skill of 4, so you upgrade each of those 1 point. It's not a huge upgrade, so you are keeping your opponent from having an enormous upgrade to one of their larger mechs. And for the 4-cost ability, you have Sharpshooter. If remaining stationary and not making physical attacks, you may fire 1 weapon only as an aimed shot, and a successful attack grants you an extra potential critical hit, even if armor still remains in that location, which is awesome. This is a great ability. So what you want to do is you want to jump this Enforcer into a heavy forest where it's well protected, or behind a hill, somewhere where it's got some good defensive bonuses, and then you're going to sit there and do aim shots with the Gauss rifle on weakened parts of your opponent and take 2 chances to get crit rolls, which is pretty freaking awesome. For a mech who is really based around its big main armament of that Gauss rifle, it is not that big a deal to not be firing the ER medium lasers until something gets fairly close to you. And once it does, you can stop using this ability and you can start moving around and firing the Gauss rifle and the ER medium lasers to back it up. And it's not that big a deal to lose the Sharpshooter ability at that point when you're trying to make some distance between your opponent and yourself. Now for the lance for my Enforcer, I have chosen to make a lance that uses all three of the versions of the Enforcer that are my favorites, which are, of course, the 5D Daniel and the two custom versions I made, because I actually really like the custom versions I made. So this is going to be a Jihad era lance because I am using a mech that has a pair of plasma rifles on it, and those do not come into play until the Jihad era. And for the lance, it is going to be a 6,000 battle value support lance. So this is being designed specifically to be the second of your two lances when fighting against an opponent at about 12,000 battle value. You have two 6,000 battle value lances. Your first lance will have some really big mechs in it, like a heavy and an assault, and then maybe a medium and a light to really scare your opponent, while you have these bunch of medium mechs and one light mech you'll see in a moment, jumping around and running around, interfering with your opponent's plans and really just messing with them. Now, with a support lance, there are no requirements in the rules that are in the Clan Invasion box set book for the support lance. Any lance can be a support lance. You just have to pick another lance and you get basically half of their ability that they get for the other lance. Meaning that if the primary lance of these two lances happens to be, for instance, a command lance, you get to have two of your units use the combat intuition ability. You just lose the extra reroll of initiative that command lances normally get. If the other lance is a battle lance, you get 3 rerolls you can use on any shots or piloting skill rolls throughout the game, rather than the 6 of the normal battle lance. And if the other lance is, say, a fire lance, you get to pick one of your mechs to get Sniper, which of course would probably be your Enforcer Daniel, so you could put Sniper on the Gauss rifle, which would be, really useful. It halves the extra difficulty for range modifiers. So medium range is only +1 difficulty and long range is only +2. All right, so what is the lance I have for this support lance? So of course we start with the Enforcer ENF 5D Daniel with its Gauss rifle, and then we back it up with the ENF 5D KIWF with its Clan Tech large pulse lasers and Clan Tech medium pulse lasers to give some really good accurate fire support to the other lance. Then we have the Enforcer KIWF 5D KIWF2 with its plasma rifles and its SRM6 to run in close and do some heat spikes on one of your opponent's enemy mechs. And finally, we have a light mech to back this up. This mech is also to aid in causing heat spikes. This is the Commando COM-3A. This is a 6'9" movement Commando with 10 single heat sinks, 2 SRM6s, a flamer, and a medium laser. This one is to really be unassuming, and with all the other mechs out there, your opponent's probably going to focus fire on them. It'll run around the flank at its 6'9" movement, try to get in fairly close, and at least get a turn or two of unloading with Inferno rounds with its 2 SRM6s and causing a second mech to get +15 heat. If your opponent is playing with some laser boat mechs that have some heat issues, these two mechs can really throw a wrench in the gears of your opponent's plans. So there you have it. That is my lance for the Enforcer. If you enjoyed this episode of Grokking Battletech, I hope you will give it a like, share it on all forms of social media, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Board Game Captain. That's Captain spelled a K on YouTube. Comment down below and let me know what you thought of my custom versions of my lance for the Enforcer. Also, let me know what other mechs I should cover in future episodes of Grokking Battletech. And until next time, game on.